everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Well, Melissa, I joined a new professional group this week.
Ooh.
It's kind of fun.
How very outgoing of you.
I know. Well, so you know how we were talking about like New Year's resolutions or like yearly goals?
Yep.
Well, one of my goals was to do a like professional development like event.
Oh.
Because like with
awesome.
COVID, I used to do that stuff, or before COVID, I used to do that stuff more. And like specifically, I used to always go to this conference called the Business of Software Conference. And, you know, like there was speakers and there was all sorts of
me too. I've done
classes
lots of that.
about, you know, specifically my industry. But I hadn't done it since COVID. So I thought, hey, you know, pretty much over that. Let's go do an event.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I signed up for this thing. And the first kind of session, it's like a 7-8 month thing. So we kinda, like,
okay.
meet
Oh,
a
so
couple
it's not
times.
an event. It's like
Not like a single event. It's spread out over like almost the whole year.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So our first meeting, the facilitator, or I guess you could even call him the coach, wanted to talk about expectations and agreements.
Oh.
And I was like, I was actually kind of like pleasantly surprised because, you know, this is like a business thing.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And really a pretty detailed, nitty-gritty kind of business thing. And so to start with this idea of talking about expectations and agreements, I thought was really fun. So I thought we should talk about it because
Ooh, I'd love to. I've had this conversation about expectations like twice this week.
I didn't get to participate as much as I wanted, so I got to, you know, talk about it more in my podcast.
Put yourself out there. It's okay.
Kept on raising my hand in class, like I knew what I was talking about.
You have to raise it from the shoulder, not just the elbow.
Yeah, right. That's funny. How introverts and extroverts raise their hand. Mine does not go above my forehead.
Right. And an extrovert looks like they are a referee on the National Football League's. Yes, exactly. Touchdown.
That's funny. So first, let's talk about expectation. And, you know, let's talk about first, like, what an expectation is.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I have one question before you do that. So the premise of this conversation with this guy, or was it? I'm sorry, I made that lump. Okay, with your group, was the expectation like or was the conversation about turning an expectation into an agreement, or was it how people like? Tell me a little bit about. Okay.
We'll get there. Be patient.
Oh, okay, got it.
No,
really?
No, really.
Have you seen my profile before?
It's how, and we talk. I mean, we've said this a million times on the pod, and like thanks to you, I was able to like sound really smart to my group.
Did you get kicked out?
Because I just parroted back what you've said to me.
No wonder they didn't take your hand when you were raising it.
Because you always say expectations are resentment waiting to happen.
Yes.
So, so what we were talking about as a group is, so I was able to share that phrase, which got me a lot of good graces from the teacher. Got me an extra gold star. But like, okay, so if that's resentment waiting to happen, we don't want resentment, right? We don't want to like go through our lives setting ourselves up for potential resentment over and over and over. Right. It's miserable. Yes. And actually we do that still all the time. I do that all the time.
Right. Well,
So what's
especially if you're
the
moving it towards something like you're trying to get someone else to be in partnership
sure?
with you, like
Yeah.
with an agreement of some sort.
So
Yes, for
so
sure.
how do you move expectation from like a potential bad thing to something that can have a good outcome, right? And that
Yeah.
would be the agreement. So
Yeah.
just shifting,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
frankly, all of this is like internal stuff, right? Well, the
Yeah.
agreement part's not, but the expectation part's like inside you.
Right, exactly. And I think that's why I was sort of asking for a little more clarity on this because you can have a lot of internal expectations about your own behavior and your own thoughts and your own outcomes. But wow, it becomes even more magnified when that expectation is geared towards or requires someone else
Yeah. So I was thinking
in
about a
partnership.
couple like easy examples,
Yeah, oh, good.
like
Perfect.
like let's go in the shallow end first. So the definition that I kind of like saw a bit and came up with was
There's the research. Way to try to hide
it
it.
was I did research. I pounded out like 3.5
Oh my
super hot minutes of research this morning before I hopped on. So an expectation is that you have a strong belief that something will happen, right? It's just
Oh,
like you
so
have
good.
a belief that something's going to happen.
Yep.
So
Yes. Agree.
I have an expectation every single day that when I jump in the air, I'm going to come back down.
Yes.
I expect gravity to behave in an extremely consistent way all the time.
Right. You don't have to learn that. It just happens.
I'm
Yep.
not worried about it. I'm not
You
like
don't have to go to a
questioning
class on
it.
how to do it.
Now, if I did jump up and I just launched into space because gravity stopped working, I guess I'd resent the Earth or something. But you know what I mean? Like, right? We expect the sun to come up every day,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. We
There'd be
have
utter
core
chaos if that
beliefs.
didn't happen. Everyone's,
Yeah. Welcome to January.
but there's lots of expectations that we have as humans that are 100% totally fine.
Yeah.
In fact, they help us sort of optimize our thinking and be more productive. Like if I had to seriously worry if gravity was going to turn off at any given moment, I would not be very productive. So I'm just cool with that expectation,
Okay.
right?
Yep. Yep. I'm just trying so hard not to take us off course because I got all the
I
good
know
visuals when you said that. Okay.
you're being very good.
I know. Squirrely. I'm
So,
squirrely today.
but when you think about expectations, the the place to me where like you were alluding to or saying is that they become a lot more problematic is when you have expectations of others or even of yourself,
Yes.
right?
Of
So these are
yourself.
like
Yes.
when you have
Yes.
expectations around people, including yourself, it
Yep.
becomes an issue. Or
Yes.
it can become an issue. Let's just say it doesn't always become an issue,
Right.
but it can become an issue.
Especially unchecked and validated by a gazillion thoughts that promote that same expectation over and over again without you challenging your
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, every time I'm in a conversation and there's any sort of disagreement, I'm going to win. That's a real expectation that people have.
That seems like a pretty strong expectation.
Yeah, but this is what people do in their minds.
Yeah.
Not saying that it
And
has to
actually,
be.
I'm gonna like this is like also what you've observed,
Yeah.
right? Like you'll see
Yes.
this in your
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. So beginning with self expectation is massive, right? And if you continue down that path and going towards where we're heading, I'm assuming we're heading with your ideas here. When you're going down that path, it doesn't only affect your ability to be in partnership with other people. It begins the number one partnership, which is your partnership with you. So if there's unmet expectations or constant expectations that are disappointing to you, you kick out a whole different way of being that other people have to work with or
Yeah.
get to work with, have to work with, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
self expectation's big.
so like it's like an example of like self expectation. I mean, just a simple example, like Like,
I can give you one.
okay.
I can give you one. So this week I had it was so much fun. I did a leadership event that was a 90-minute leadership event over Zoom, which, boy, those normally aren't very easy. And there were 40 people. And it was the most fantastic discussion. It's the first time I had been with these 40 people. And we were just talking about awareness and that sort of thing. And a really key player on the team raised his hand immediately and said, I have really strong expectations and I get let down all the time. And I was like, wow, that's a really big example that you just used. Would you mind expanding on it? And he said, yeah, I expect that our customer service in our team is going to look a certain way. I expect that everything will be done really quickly and in a perfect manner. And if that means staying late to get it done, if that means going above and beyond to have it happen, I just expect that that's what's going to happen here for all of us, for me, for all of us. And then I get really let down because I don't have the energy sometimes to do all of these really strong things that I think are, quote, required. And so he was even saying how he was setting a tone for everyone, and yet he was letting himself down because he felt that he couldn't hit that perfectionism.
Yeah.
So that was a really good example of self-expectation, and it manifests outward, but it was beginning with him.
Yeah.
So that's to me, that's a really good example of that.
So, yeah, I bet if we all thought about it, we have so many self-expectations. Yeah, like expect I'm gonna behave in a certain way or act in a certain way or like look a certain way.
Or have certain outcomes.
When I'm not meeting those, it can really like come out in lots of different ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in this conversation, specifically talking about the agreements part of it, you and I have talked a lot about the self-expectation piece. But when you start talking now about the agreements part of it, right?
Well, the agreements part, like, let's first talk about like expectations with others.
Yep.
Because as you were saying that, I just realized that we had a thing at work yesterday where we have half day Fridays, right? But there's occasionally like a time where there's a tech support case that's going sideways, or there's a customer emergency or something, and like whoever's dealing with it just has to put in a couple extra hours on Friday.
Yeah, just get it done.
And what I discovered with talking with one of the managers was that there are some people who look at half day Friday as like a perk and not something that should be expected. And so when it comes to putting in maybe a little bit of extra during that half day, no problem. Like, this was a free thing to me anyway. This is a company perk. I love that I get the opportunity to have this anyway.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
And then there's some employees that see that as like part of just
their hours, their regular hours.
Their hours, right? Like, no, this company only, does a 34-hour work week, so no way I'm working my half day Friday. So there's like the expectation around what that half day is between people is different. And I didn't actually realize it, and I didn't realize that the expectation there was different among different people.
Sure.
So then I thought, well, how are we going to solve this? Like, because how am I going to get this back to like what we want it to be and have it work for everybody? Because what's about to happen if I don't take any action is there's going to be a bunch of people who have different expectations about what half day Friday is.
Right.
And they're going to get like cross at each other.
Right. Because some departments or some positions, they can't, if the customer is working, so are they. I mean, that's just inherent in the customer facing roles, right? Yep. It's like, And then the more operational or the more non-customer facing component, it's easier for them to choose. So yeah, there is just naturally a rub there, just in expectation.
So this is where that idea of an agreement comes right in to play.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the way I can solve this problem is with an agreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That's true. Yeah. So the question is, how do you take an expectation that you have, that you personally have, and all of us, and make sure that you are in partnership with the people or the other person in a way that allows them to understand your point. And that you understand their point, and that their expectations are appropriately the same as yours, or in alignment, maybe not identical, but in alignment, so that they are in agreement with it. So
that sounds like a lot of talking. Let's not do that. No, I mean, you would have to talk all that out, right?
Yeah.
Well, and if I'm kind of facilitating that conversation, what really has to happen is I need to be like open and listening to those other like points of view, because it's so easy to come into a conversation with your expectations and then just like roll over everybody, especially if you have any sort of like hierarchical power over others. That's, to me, I'm very conscious of like not coming into situations with my like CEO owner hat on.
What is that hat? Is it a big hat? Is it like one of those huge styrofoam cowboy hats that you can get at the state fair? Red, bouncy.
No. We're in a tech company. It's a beanie.
Oh my God. What a visual. Well, I actually think it isn't just that. I think it is also having the awareness to be very clear that you have this expectation. So that is like that's the self-consideration piece,
like
right?
what you would start this conversation with, hey gang, I have this expectation about how we handle client emergencies on half day Friday, and here's what it is.
Yes. And understanding the why and making sure that it's pure. I mean, I think that, and
now, how would you suggest someone comes into a conversation like, hey, this is, because even when I said that, when I verbalized what my expectations are, I felt that other people would be intimidated by me just coming out and being so forthright with what I expected.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't think that sounded super strong. I know you thought it does, but we could unpack that on another pod. I think it is being purely intended makes a huge difference. Your intention makes a huge difference. So if your intention is to make sure that your customer is taken care of, because that's really what we're talking about, that your intention is purely for us to keep our customers happy, because the more customers we have, the more revenue we have, and we're all safe and can continue to do these great things.
Take
right?
Care of this
the intention
get a paycheck. It's a simple equation.
But given that, and again, this is another whole topic, but given that we literally have 4 generations in the workforce right now. Yeah. Each generation has a very clear expectation, and I can promise you they don't match.
Oh yeah, totally.
They don't match. So, so what happens in situations such as in the work environment that we're talking about, expectations to agreements, it has to be communicated and explained succinctly and consistently. I find most of the challenge with leadership is that leaders think that if they think it all through and they say it once, it will be completely absorbed.
Oh yeah.
But you have to repeat something multiple times for it to be absorbed in the way that everyone really gets it. Yeah. So to me, it's like, all right, I have a pure intention of making sure we're doing this well. I realize that by the decision that I made before, that it left a little bit of a gap that I didn't see. Now
Yep.
I see it. And so I have to make amends to it somehow. I have to figure out how to communicate in a slightly different way so that people can hear the value of why. You know, I mean, it's the whole why thing.
Yep.
And I think once that happens, and then you can explain it in a way that your intention is pure. Now, if you come in hot, throw your book down, you're
Yep.
pissed off, you know, this is happening. We can't have this customer called us mad on Monday because nobody answered the phone on Friday. If you come in hot, people will shut down and they can't hear you. So much of it is the energy and the
Yep.
intention that you're putting
Yep.
across. It really, really is. And that's the self part. That's the self communication part.
So this idea that we can collaborate on
Yes.
an agreement together, like
Yeah.
how we're going to act as a
It's a
group,
good word. I love that word. Collaborate.
kind of flips the expectation, right? Like
Yeah.
it no longer is only owned by me, and
Right.
it's only it can either be like at that point if it's just me, it's either like satisfied, like gravity, or it's not, and that just turns into resentment or anger or
Yep.
the frustration,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's also something to do with the speed in which you connect. But okay, sorry. Go ahead.
But flipping it into like sort of this more collaborative idea, like, hey, let's agree how we're gonna act here. Then you're both like in partnership with it's like an agreement is like expectation in partnership.
Right. So let's go back to my example that I gave earlier,
Mm-hmm.
because that's exactly what we're talking about is he had this really strong expectation of self. But by the way, he was influential for the team so that everybody knew whatever he said, pretty much everybody had to do. Okay. But the way he did it was so incredibly loving. I can't explain it. He took the fall himself. He said, I have these expectations that aren't getting met, and often it's me. And I really resent that I feel this way and that I have these expectations and I'm not quite sure what to do about it.
And
So
there's our other fun little word, which is guilt. Like, right?
Yep.
It kind of spirals into
Yep.
guilt.
Yeah. And so what happened is this whole team, first of all, they were quiet because, you know, one of the big dogs is saying something that's very meaningful. And then a couple of people started to shake their heads yes. And then somebody else said, I feel like that too. And then another person said, I think our team can be better at talking about this. And then I think our team used to do all of those things a lot better, and we've gotten a little soft. And they all started to come together to
Interesting.
explore the conversation more, which,
Yeah.
boy, oh boy, that was unbelievable on a call, like on a
Yeah.
Zoom call.
On a Zoom
They were-
call, for sure.
They were, you know, using the emojis to clap. They were in the chat bars. They were commenting just crazy. And then some of them were talking, and it was great because the introverts had the chat. So
Yeah.
if they didn't want to say something, and I'm just saying there are ways in which when you want to make these agreements, it's like meet people where they are. And don't be
Yeah.
so focused on where you are that you miss where they are. So this is
Yeah.
like the whole partnership piece to make it into an actual
Yeah.
agreement.
Yeah, we're using all these work examples, which are
Yeah.
pretty easy.
Yeah.
But expectations in our personal lives are
yeah.
everywhere.
Yes.
Like I expect my kids to behave in certain ways. They never do that.
I expect my children to start a 401k when they're
Yeah,
9.
right. But
No, you're right. You're right. It is, and
it's kinda
those are
easy,
really
like-
hard. Those are really hard because
yeah, when we talk about like the tactical sort of like, oh, are we taking care of customer service on
yeah,
in the way we want to? Well, yeah, that's tactical. But
Yeah.
when maybe like I expect my spouse to like show their love or appreciation for me in a certain way, and that expectation is unmet, like holy
Yes.
cow, that's a
Yeah, it
whole
creates a
different
huge gap.
level, of emotion.
non-agreement. It's a whole different level of
Yeah.
non-agreement. I don't want to say disagreement because that would imply there's a discussion and an argument. I would say non-agreement simply because all of the thinking and the chatter has only been on one side of the equation. And the same thing is probably happening with your spouse. It's the same thing with, with Mitch and I and probably anybody else that's in partnership with somebody, right? It's like, yes, that happens all the time, especially with the person that you're the closest to, because you're in tandem with them all the time, and so many things are taken for granted.
Yep.
So that when there is different expectation that's not within the, quote, norm, it really can cause a ruckus.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some things that are fairly interesting about even being in partnership with someone for a really long time.
Yeah.
Because like the way maybe I behaved for the first 20 years of our relationship was one way, but, now I've been working on changing the way I think, maybe, or exploring, maybe on a self-awareness journey. And I decided I change, like the way I act is maybe different now, or right. So like, the expectation kind of has to change.
Yeah.
I'm not saying for good or bad. It just
gets to just
change,
morphs. Right? Yeah. Yes,
and there's so many stories about how people, gone through big events, like they've gotten through alcoholism, or they hit rock bottom in some way, or they had a tragic death with someone close to them, and they have fundamentally changed as a person, given that event. So like maybe how they were expected to behave before the event and how they behave after it is different, and it actually takes people a while to adapt.
Oh, totally.
And not go back to like the old way.
Yes.
Right? Humans seem very conditioned to like expect the old way of behavior,
even if they don't want it. Even if they don't
want it, and even if it's been changed by somebody, it's still like somehow permanently imprinted in our brains. Like expectations are surprisingly imprinted into us.
Yeah. It's because it's that mental thinking pattern over and over again where you've just run the track so many times that it's a thinking habit. That's what I call that. Your brain is has a habitual thought, and a habitual thought becomes a belief. So what you're talking about is when you get into that place where you just have that same idea that keeps cropping up, even if something has been modified or changed, your old belief or that consistent belief is simply a habitual thought, and you get to change those habitual thoughts by replacing them with something new, but it does take a little while.
Yeah.
With intention.
It takes a while.
Again, with intention.
Yep. Well, this is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad we got to explore this topic.
Me too.
I think there's a lot of room for me to think about like finding where some of those expectations are, and then maybe just reaffirming that those expectations are okay with an agreement. Like, hey, we're still cool with like me doing this and you doing that, right? All right, agreed.
Yeah. And the very core basis of being in partnership with other human beings is to be in partnership with other human beings. And in order to have that, we have to have a most agreeable way. It has to be. Otherwise, partnerships are painful and usually don't last. But generally speaking, in our lives, we have many consistent people that we have in our lives, and on purpose. And we do need to and get to work on how to make agreements out of expectations more easily. And I think it begins just with that process we've talked about, and I think it's really worth considering how to make that a shorter process. What parts of that whole thing have we talked about that have you elongated by being stubborn or being resentful or what have you? And what would happen if you set all that down?
Yeah, and frankly, like it feels to me like going to someone and talking through, like turning in an expectation and talking through it and making it into an agreement.
Yeah.
Is like a courageous and loving act.
I agree. Yeah, I love those words. That's so true. Yeah, it's definitely worthy. It's worthy of some thought.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.